Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone in today's class for the 6th elementary grade. Our textbook is Weekend 3 and today inshallah we will cover Unit 8, Lives, Ups and Downs, Reading and Writing on pages 62 and 63. This lesson will be presented by me, teacher Mazen Harbi, and the sign language by Mr. Fawaz Al-Agil. So let's begin. Quick revision on our last lesson. In our last lesson, we had played and practiced a fun game, where in this game we said that we can write and play the verb game, and we can also play it with a partner. And how did this game went? We said simply, all what we have to do is to look at this table and to look at these verbs. And after this, you're going to listen to different sentences. And what you're going to do after you listen to these sentences is to either underline or to circle the verbs you heard. So we said that in order to practice and in order to get to know the verbs, the irregular verbs in the past, all what we have to do is to just listen to the sentences the teacher says, and we only circle and underline the words that were in these sentences. So we did this. We did listen to sentences, and we did made a underline all of the verbs we heard. And of course, they're not all the verbs in the table, only the verbs we heard. And among them was this word, caught, and also lost, and got, and had, were, made. So all of these were the verbs that we heard last time. When we listen to the sentences and when I ask you to try to underline or try to circle the verbs you heard. And here we go. These were the verbs that we did underline in the practice of this game, the verb game. The words were made, had, caught, got, lost, and were. So, and also we said that when we play this game again, now it is time, it's not only to underline here in this table, you're not going to have the verbs showing in front of you. No, and here all you have to do, you will have an empty table, and what you're going to do is, after you listen, you're going to write down the verbs that you heard. And it's, of course, you need to use them or write these verbs in the different order than the verb game number 1. So we did this, we did listen to different sentences, and we did write the verbs that we heard in these sentences. So unlike the verb game number 1, where we only had 6 verbs, in this one we did write 9 irregular verbs. Verbs like had, got, caught, was, lost, made, broke, saw, and were. So we listened to sentences. We did by ourselves write down the verbs here on, and each sentence will have only one verb. So this is what we did. This is where we do write where we went and write these verbs. So it's a fun game. Actually, it can be played by 2 ways. Either we play the verb game 1, where we're going to have these verbs in front of us here, and all we have to do is just to underline the verbs we are hearing. Or to make it funnier, to make it more challenging, which is to have an empty table like this, in verb game 2, to have an empty table like this, and by ourselves we go on and write down the verbs that we heard. So it's a fun game. You can practice it whether with regular verbs or irregular verbs, and with even not only verbs, but we can do it with words for animals, for example, or words for cars, or words that we learned here in our book. And now, let's remind ourselves of today's lesson objectives. So at the end of this lesson, we hope that you will be able to differentiate between the past and present simple verb forms, and also to use some and any in a context correctly, and even to chant my brother Khaled using the past tense. So inshallah we will cover all of these objectives in today's lesson. So let's begin. First, I would like you to please open your books on page 62. I would like you please to open your books on page 62. Now, on page 62, reading and writing. And what we're going to do here for the first part of our lesson is we're going to listen to this reading. And after this, I'm going to read, and I would like you to follow with me while I'm reading. And after this, we can make it more interesting by chanting this text. So we're going to do this text in 3 ways. We're going first to listen to the teacher reading this text. After this, we're going to read with the teacher while we are following with him. And after this, the third thing we will do, which is we're going to chant. We're going to chant this text with the teacher. So here I divided this text into 2 parts. Let's read together the first part. So, my brother Khaled. My brother Khaled went to the cupboard to find something to eat. But when he got there, the cupboard was bare, and so he had nothing to eat. Now I'm going to read it again, and this time I would like you to follow with me while I'm reading. Let's start. My brother Khaled. My brother Khaled went to the cupboard to find something to eat. But when he got there, the cupboard was bare, and so he had nothing to eat. So the story of the first part is Khaled wants to have something to eat, but he went to the cupboard. As you can see, it was empty. There were nothing to eat there. Now, before we chant this chant, can you have a second look at this text and tell me how many irregular verbs can we see here? If we have a look at this text, can you tell me how exactly the verbs or the irregular verbs we can see here? Excellent. Here we can see 4 irregular verbs, which is went, got, was, and had. Very well. Now, before we leave this part, let's chant it again, me and you. My brother Khaled. My brother Khaled went to the cupboard to find something to eat. But when he got there, the cupboard was bare, and so he had nothing to eat. Very well. Now let us move on to the second part of this text. Now, with the second part, we're going to do exactly as we did with the first one. You're going to listen to me read it, and after this, you're going to read with me while you are following, and then we're going to chant it together. So let's begin. My brother Khaled. He went to the grocer's to buy some fruit and milk. But when he came back, he was holding an empty brown bag. Poor Khaled. Now, follow with me. My brother Khaled. He went to the grocer's to buy some fruit and milk. But when he came back, he was holding an empty brown bag. Poor Khaled. Very well. Now, it seems that Khaled is having a bad luck. So, when he went to the grocer's, to the supermarket to buy something to eat. So he did shop for fruit and milk, but when he came back, the bag was empty. There is nothing in the bag. So now, before we start chanting this one, I would like you to have a second look at this text. And I would like you to tell me how many irregular verbs can we see here in this text. So, having a look at this part and tell me how many irregular verbs can we see here? Exactly. Here we can see 3 irregular verbs. Went, came, and was. Went, came, and was. And all of these are irregular verbs that we use from time to time. Now, before we leave this part, let's read it again, or let's chant it together, me and you. My brother Khaled, he went to the grocer's to buy some fruit and milk. But when he came back, he was holding an empty brown bag. Poor Khaled. Very well. Now, let us move on to the second exercise we're having, which is to practice in pairs. And in this one, we're going to read all the irregular verbs that we read in the text. And after this, we're going to try to change the tense. And by changing the tense, we mean that we change it from the verb that we use in the past to a verb that we can use in the present. And we can see the differences together. So let's start. Now we're going to chant the verbs in the past tense. So the first one we have is, and say with me, went, got, was, had, went, came, was. Very well. Now, all of these verbs are in the past tense. But if we want to change the story of Khaled, if we want to change it from the past to the present, so what are the changes that we had to do? The changes that we're going to have to make is changes relating to the verbs. So let's read the verbs now in the present tense, and we can see the differences between the past and the present. In the present, the verbs will be, instead of went, it will be goes. And got in the past, gets in the present. Was in the past, is in the present. Has, goes, comes, is. So here you can see these verbs are in the present tense. And to make it more interesting, we can rewrite in pairs with your classmate or your friend. You can rewrite the story, but instead of using the verbs in the past, you can use them in the present form, as we can see here. Now, I would like you please to turn your books on page 63. I would like you please to turn it on page 63. Now, it is challenge time. And what we're going to do here with the challenge time is just we want to know what they are cooking. So, you're going to listen to the chant and circle the words, and so we can know what they cooked. So here we have these words are the one we're going to circle at each sentence. So before we do this, before we start circling the words, let's first read these words. So I'm going to say the words and I would like you to say it after me. Meat, chicken, cheese, butter, tomatoes, salad, macaroni, bread, carrots, onions, potatoes, apples, rice, flour, eggs, oil, juice, milk, mustard, ketchup. Very well. Now we're going to listen to the chant and we're going to circle the words we heard. So let's begin with the first part. We had some meat, but we didn't have any cheese. We had some tomatoes, but we didn't have any macaroni. We had some onions, but we didn't have any apples. So, what do you think? What are the words you heard? For the first one, did you hear meat or chicken? Did you hear cheese or butter? For the first one, we did hear meat and cheese. So now we go and circle meat and cheese. As for the second one, we had some tomatoes or salad. What did you hear? Or macaroni or bread. Which one did you hear? In the second one, we heard tomatoes and macaroni. What about the last one or the last part? We had some carrots or onions. And here, potatoes or apples. Which one did you hear? It is, of course, we heard onions and apples. Now, let us move on to the second part of this chant. And as we did with before, now we're going to listen and to circle the word we heard. We had some flour, but we didn't have any eggs. We had some juice, but we didn't have any mustard. Now, what about the first part? What is the word you heard? Is it rice or flour? Or is it eggs or oil? So for the next one, we heard flour and eggs. What about the last one? Juice and milk. Which one did we use? And mustard or ketchup. We use juice and mustard. So, it's important that we can do this chant again. We can rewrite it with a partner and we can also make comments about this chant. Maybe we can think of any food and we can make a chant about this food. Maybe we can say that we have this type of food, but we don't have this type of food in order to prepare this meal. And you can also use comments like, I think it's boring, I think it's interesting, or I think it's funny, easy, difficult. So we can use any comment we would like after we choose and after we rewrite this chant. So at the end, my dear student, it is important that you can read and write my brother Khaled chant and also to use some and any in sentences and write a new chant. So now, my dear student, we have reached the end of our lesson. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you next time.